Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to day 2 of the Cohesion Forum. For those who weren't here yesterday, let me introduce myself. My name is Jackie Davis. I am your Master of Ceremonies and also will be moderating our final panel this afternoon. And I'm delighted to welcome the many hundreds of you here in the room with us and also the many hundreds more who are joining us online. We had over 1,000 people with us yesterday, and I'm sure we're going to replicate that again today with the very rich program and the fabulous speakers we have for you. Before I introduce our first speakers, a little bit of housekeeping. Just a reminder, interpretation. English on 1, French on 2, German on 3, Italian on 4, Spanish on 5, and Polish on 6. If you would like to join in our discussion later on in the interactive panels, you can either scan the QR code that appears on the screen now, and we will show it at intervals throughout the day, or you can go into slido.com on your browser and just put in the hashtag Cohesion Forum. The only request I have for you, if you are writing your questions, is please be as brief as possible so we can see at a glance what your question is and who it is for. During the panels, we'll also try, if there's time, to take some questions from those in the room via raised hands. Last housekeeping point, social media hashtag. If you wish to share the cohesion policy messages that you are hearing at this forum, and we do encourage you to do so, please use the same hashtag as for Slido, Cohesion Forum. So we started yesterday with a powerful reminder of why cohesion policy is so important and why the discussions we are having here over these 2 days matter so much at what Commissioner Ferreira called this moment of change. What we're doing is, yesterday we took stock of the achievements to date, and we began already to consider how the policy can be improved, updated, adapted to deal with the new challenges that we face, in order to go back to Commissioner Ferreira's famous phrase at the end of her speech yesterday, to make sure that cohesion policy continues to turn hope into action. So we're going to build on that today with 2 sessions, 2 panel sessions that came up on issues that came up in the discussion yesterday. The triple transition, not just the green and digital transition we talk about a lot, but also the demographic transition and cohesion as a shared objective for all policies. But we're going to start with a couple of keynote speakers. I'm going to introduce the Commissioner Schmit, a little bit later on, but first, European Parliament President Roberta Metsola couldn't be with us today, but she did want to speak to you, so she sent us a video. Let's hear what she has to say.
Dear friends, the European Union cohesion policy is the most explicit expression of EU solidarity, as it is in this solidarity that Europe is at its strongest. The idea of Europeans coming together to build a better future together stems from a desire to bridge disparities between European countries and regions. We must never lose sight of that. Our cohesion policy is our best tool to level up societies and improve the well-being of all Europeans. We know that cohesion funds have a significant macroeconomic influence in less privileged areas, increasing GDP by up to 2% each year. This is also why we will continue to allot almost 400 billion euros to cohesion funds under the current EU budget. This is testimony to the EU's commitment to its regions. And yet, we are living in an era of change. With the climate emergency, the consequences of war on our continent and populism rising, we face challenges ahead, and we must prepare to steer our cohesion policy in line with geopolitics of change. Going forward, we will need to pay even more attention to the political level closest to our citizens and optimize the way we run the European Union throughout our multi-tier levels of governance. Our ways and methods must be fit for purpose and be better tailored to local needs. Going forward, we must give more support to high-impact projects that can reduce regional economic disparities and promote a vibrant economy across the European Union. Going forward, we will need to step up and deliver on our plans for a green and digital transition to make our economy more sustainable, more resilient and future-proof. Although there is more to do, our efforts to improve Europe for the benefit of its people and regions have borne fruit. And here I want to especially thank Commissioner Ferreira for organizing this important forum. The continued success of our cohesion policy relies also on continued investment in making it work. And I am glad that I can count on all of you attending today's 9th Cohesion Forum for that. Thank you.
European Parliament President Roberta Metsola, ladies and gentlemen. It is now my pleasure to welcome to the stage Nicolas Schmit, European Commissioner for Jobs and Social Rights. Commissioner.
Good morning, everybody. Dear Lisa, first, thank you for bringing us together on this very important subject, which is really the subject which touches all European citizens. Dear ministers, dear guests, dear friends of a strong cohesion policy. Just a few months ago, we bade farewell to one of Europe's greatest leaders, Jacques Delors. And his enduring legacy as President of the European Commission includes the shaping of cohesion policy as we know it. During his presidency, Jacques Delors relentlessly pursued a Europe that, in his words, was built on competition that stimulates, cooperation that strengthens, and solidarity that unites. Today, gathered at this 9th Cohesion Forum, we celebrate one of these 3 driving forces for Europe envisaged by Delors, the solidarity that unites us. Solidarity underpinned the past, underpins the present, and must also underpin the future of our cohesion policy. The debate on the future of our cohesion policy is in the open, kick-started by our high-level group report published in February, which gives us a lot of insight, but a lot of analysis, and also a lot of good advices for the future. It has been followed by the Committee of the Regions Summit last month, and now by the European Commission's 9th Cohesion Report, which was adopted just a few weeks ago. This Cohesion Forum constitutes an important stepping stone for this debate, thanks to the participation of representatives of EU institutions, national, regional, and local authorities from all member states, social and economic partners, non-governmental organizations, and academia. People on the ground always have more knowledge on the exact needs of their territory, so there cannot be any debate on the future of cohesion policy without the input of local partners and stakeholders. Today's Cohesion Forum also comes at a timely moment. We are approaching the European Parliament elections, in which citizens from all member states have the opportunity to express their views on how EU policies are shaped, and we are starting to implement the current budgetary cycle while preparing the next. More than 30 years have passed since Jacques Delors pronounced the words I just quoted and unleashed, the transformational powers of the single market and a reinforced cohesion policy designed to go hand in hand in strengthening Europe's economies, societies, and territorial cohesion. Some 20 years have gone by since the European Union almost doubled in size and power by welcoming new member states in the 2004 and subsequent enlargement waves. If we look at these 2 milestones together, the launch of the single market and of the reinforced cohesion policy on the one hand and the enlargement to the east on the other, we can see a clear long-term trend. Many parts of Europe have experienced a remarkable upward economic and social convergence. And I remember when this cohesion policy was put into the Single European Act. And the reflection was, at that time, also about an enlargement. It was the enlargement to our southern partners. And the law was very much aware of the fact that a single market was indispensable for a strong Europe, but it was not a guarantee for all parts of this stronger Europe to benefit of the same advantages. And so cohesion policy and single market are in some way the two sides of the same coin. It was exactly to build a strong Europe based on solidarity. But his reflection was not just about economic. It was also about democracy, because we should never forget that the three southern countries that joined the European Union, at that time, it was at that time, by the way, called European Community, were getting out of authoritarian regimes and were building up their democratic societies and their democratic systems. So cohesion is also an instrument for strengthening democracy in our union. Eastern EU countries in particular have made significant progress in social inclusion, healthcare, and reducing poverty and unemployment. Disparities in employment between regions have narrowed, with less developed regions impressively halving their unemployment rates to 8%. These achievements are in no small part thanks to cohesion policy, which has played a key role in supporting public investment, especially in less developed member states. Cohesion policy has also strengthened Europe's local economies and the attractiveness of regions, boosting innovation, entrepreneurship by supporting SMEs, and I would add, as a commissioner in charge of that, social economy, which is also a driving force in improving the economic and social development in the different territories. Importantly, cohesion policy has been and will continue to be instrumental for Europe's green and digital transitions. For me, it's clear there can be no transition if its returns are not fairly distributed, and there can be no fair distribution without the European solidarity which underpins our cohesion policy. Fairness and the solidarity which enables it is what makes the disruption inevitably brought about by the transitions acceptable for our societies. This is why, as our economies and societies are transformed to meet our climate and technological needs, we must ensure sustained investment in our people, in our labor force, and in the social infrastructure that defines Europe's social market economy. While the green and digital transitions provide new opportunities for quality job growth, they must be actively managed and steered in our preferred direction. Because the alternative would mean business relocate to places where energy is greener and cheaper, and jobs will move with them. Because the alternative would mean also that artificial intelligence and online platforms increasingly impacting the day-to-day work in many companies without workers, trade unions, or governments having any say on how this happens. Because the alternative would mean less developed regions struggling to get out of the talent development traps, with local young skilled workers migrating as local businesses stagnate into irrelevance. And I like, above all, this nice formula of Enrico Letta. We have the right to move, the right of free movement, but we should have also the liberty to stay. This is not the future that I want. This is not the future we want. The future that we have to stand for is a future where we are in the driving seat and need to turn the challenges into opportunities. To do so, we must invest in our future, in our people. Cohesion policy and the European Social Fund, in particular, is the main European tool for this investment. But how do we direct our investments? How do we know where our investment priorities lie? How do we keep track on the progress of our actions as the investment flow? Enter the European pillar and social rights. The pillar is our compass on our 3 EU headline targets for 2030 on employment, skills, and poverty reduction, agreed upon at the Porto Summit in 2021. Based on where we stand now, it is clear that we must invest more in those outside of the labor market, the long-term unemployed, women, but also older people, and importantly, the young. This is primarily what is needed to address the growing labor shortages we have been witnessing in Europe for over a decade. Despite the progress achieved in recent years, thanks to our cohesion policy, youth unemployment levels in the EU are still more than double those of overall unemployment, while the number of needs young people not in employment, education, or training remains dangerously high, with almost 8 million of them in the European Union. We must also care for the weakest, for some people in the EU, and I particularly, and we have visited together with Elisa some camps of Roma people who are especially discriminated and disadvantaged. And our social model is not working for them. We must fix and rebuild this social model and ensure upward social mobility. When investing in those already in the labor market, we must help them to reach their full potential, though up and reskilling. Here, we must also support older people who have unfortunately often been overlooked in the past. When it comes to poverty reduction, significant efforts remain to be done. There are still too many people in our union that are at risk of poverty, especially kids. And with the child guarantee, I think we have created also a basis for good synergies, working with different funds, especially the ERDF fund and the ESF Fund Plus, precisely to put into implementation the child guarantee. So more investments are needed. I want just to mention at the end one important investment, and this is about housing. We are facing a housing crisis in Europe. There are, in cities, in regions, all over Europe, millions of people who are really facing a difficulty to find an affordable place to live. And I think this has to be addressed. I know that this is mainly a national, a local, a regional task and competence, but Europe has to take over its part. And there is a strong demand also from partners, social partners, and other authorities, and especially local authorities. We had different meetings also in the Committee of Regions, in the Economic and Social Committee, where really the issue is there, and there is a demand that Europe is doing more. And I think this should also become part of our cohesion policy. It still is, but we have to increase the activities and also the funds dedicated to active housing policy in order to address this crisis. Last month, the first ever joint EPSCO-ECOFIN meeting took place with national ministers in charge of the economy and finance, discussing with ministers for employment and social affairs the positive effects of social reforms and investments on economic growth and fiscal sustainability. And that's about social investments contributing to a more resilient European economy, but also society. Dear friends, let me conclude by recalling that some of the challenges we face today are not too dissimilar from those faced by Jacques Delors when he was President of the European Commission. As he boosted cohesion policy, he aimed at supporting the transition of industrial regions in decline, ensuring the reintegration of the long-term unemployed and the integration of young people into the labor market. As we debate on how to shape our cohesion policy for the future, we should bear in mind Delors' lesson and remind ourselves that there cannot be any competition that stimulates or cooperation that strengthens without a solidarity that unites. Cohesion policy is that very European solidarity put into practice, and I like also your formula, hope transforming into action. Following in the law's footsteps, we need to strengthen it and shape it to adapt it to the new challenges of our time, and I'm convinced that this Cohesion Forum will help shape this debate. Thank you very much.